Welcome to Expert Profiles Atlanta, where Atlanta's influencers and innovators share strategies for overcoming obstacles and achieving success in business and life. Here's your host, best-selling author and Atlanta influencer, Neil Howe.
Hello and welcome to the show. This is your host, Neil Howe, and today my guest is JoAnna Smith. She is managing partner of Anderson, Rupani and Smith, and she does divorce, child custody, and child support cases on a sliding scale for people who don't qualify for free legal services but cannot afford traditional legal representation. Well, I'm sure there are many people in that category, JoAnna, so welcome to the show and let's get talking about it.
Thanks for having me.
Well, tell us a little bit about Anderson, Rupani and Smith and how you're helping your clients.
Yes, so we are a family law firm. So as you said, we do divorce, child custody, child support cases. So everything from when people agree with their, how they want to get divorced, we can help them with paperwork, all the way to when people aren't doing what they're supposed to do for a settlement agreement after the divorce. We can help enforce child support or custody agreements. The way our firm is a little bit different is that we serve the 80% of Georgia residents that don't qualify for free legal services, but can't afford the $5,000 retainer or the high rates that other attorneys charge. We work on a sliding scale based on people's income. So we're able to help a lot of people who wouldn't normally have access to legal representation.
That's definitely an interesting business model there. As you stated, there's a lot of lawyers out there that will only, work once they get that $5,000 retainer, but to actually work on a sliding scale, explain that a little bit more and why you did that.
Sure. So we came out, our firm came out of the Lawyers for Equal Justice Incubator Program, which helps young attorneys start their own firms trying to serve this population of folks. And so we wanted to make legal representation more accessible to more people. Our sliding scale, we ask people some information about their income. And generally, we're serving folks who are around 400% of the federal poverty line or higher. And so we ask for income information, and our rates are based on that fee. We ask for a smaller retainer and then have people make monthly payments into their trust account so that they can keep a balance there, but they know exactly how much each month they're going to have to pay. And so it's not a surprise when you get that big bill from your attorney at the end of the month.
Well, that's definitely a way to help people who are in need and to be able to help more people get the solutions to their problems. Now, you did mention a few things: divorce, child custody, and child support. Let's, go into them. I'm sure they all go together, but what are the main problems or issues that people have when considering divorce?
Yeah, so a divorce can be either uncontested, which means you guys agree on everything. You just need help figuring out what paperwork to file and how to divide, put everything in legal ease. Or it can be contested, which is most of the kind of divorces that we see where nothing's going right and you guys don't agree on anything and you need someone to represent you to get your divorce finalized. The big issues that people face are division of assets. So that's everything like bank accounts, retirement accounts, the house, all kinds of things like that. And division of debts. So if you have a mortgage on that house or credit card debts or medical debts, we help figure out how to divide those things up. And then a big part of that, as you say, is related to custody and visitation if there's any children involved. And so developing a parenting plan, figuring out what child support should be, figuring out if there needs to be alimony between the parties. We deal with all of those issues to help people draft a settlement agreement and parenting plan that they then can file with the court, or we'll go to trial with them and help them get the court to issue a settlement agreement and a parenting plan that best represents their interests.
Never an easy time when somebody is going through divorce, but unfortunately it happens way more than it should, and there are a lot of issues to really look at. So describe some of the issues that come up with assets. I can understand why there would be squabbles and disagreements when it comes to assets. What kind of factors come into play when you look at that?
Yeah, a lot of times it's about how much an asset is actually, what value it actually has. And so for a home, for example, we may need to reach out to experts like an appraiser or an inspector to figure out how much a house is actually worth before we can squabble over how much of that is each person's, how much each person is entitled to. For things like alimony and child support, the argument is over how much money a person is actually making. If someone is working for Uber, or has a business of their own, it may be difficult to see how much they're actually making, and we may need to do some discovery or requests for information in order to figure that out. There's also different issues about, is somebody working up to their capacity, and things like that. For child support, especially when we get into the child support area, we have a lot of people who come to us and say, I think he's hiding money, and so he's saying that he can't pay the amount of child support that I think that he should be paying. And so again, we go through a discovery process to be able to track down all the financial documents in order to figure out what different people are actually making and how much they should be responsible for.
Right, and that can be kind of difficult if somebody's trying to hide money, but I would suppose their lifestyle would tell you just how much they are bringing in each month.
Yeah, so we can definitely look at that too. So we would also request things like credit card statements. We would be looking at how much they're spending, because if it looks like they're spending a whole lot more than what they say they're making, and they don't have a lot of credit card debt, then we may be able to say, look, he's got money coming from somewhere.
Now, how about when there is a house that has value in it? How do you determine who either gets to keep the house or whether it needs to be sold to get the money out of it?
Yeah, so Georgia law says that anything that happened before the marriage is considered premarital. And so parties, that would not be divisible during a marriage. So if the wife, for example, had a house prior to marriage, and that would not be divisible as part of the divorce unless her spouse put money into the house or they refinanced it, did something to make a portion of that house marital. If the house was purchased during the marriage with marital funds, then we would look at how the money, does it make sense for one party to keep the house? Will they be able to afford it? Were the kids living there, and do we need some stability for the kids? But Georgia doesn't require that everything be divided 50-50. It just requires that things be divided equitably. And so for a house, that can be a difficult issue to deal with on your own about what is equitable, especially if there are kids involved, and it's about their well-being in addition to just the money there.
Definitely, the kids need to come first. But let's talk about the debts for a minute, because I think one of the number one causes of divorce is for financial reasons. If there is a lot of debt, how is that split?
Yeah, so again, debt is also in Georgia not split 50-50, it's split equitably. And so anything that was accrued during the marriage is considered a marital debt, but it doesn't necessarily mean that if two people get divorced, that each of them are going to be responsible for half of that debt. The parties can either agree on what they think is equitable, or you can ask a judge to make that decision for you. If one party is making a lot of money and the other one's not making any money, it may be that it's not equitable for that party who's not making a lot of money to have all of the debt. And so you can shift those percentages around, but unfortunately there's no good solid rule about who gets what debt. It's going to be what you can negotiate or what you can convince a judge is equitable.
Well, just those things alone, I can see a lot of contention between both sides. I'm surprised there's any uncontested divorces when we talk about that. What kind of percentage is uncontested, and do they often lead to something that is a little less than that?
I don't have a good percentage on what is contested and uncontested. What I can tell you is that even cases that start as contested, most of them we can settle during mediation or through negotiations. And so very few of our cases actually end with a trial, because trials are expensive and time consuming and stressful. And so most cases, probably upwards of 90%, actually settle prior to any sort of trial. So even if they don't start out uncontested, they're not being litigated in the courtrooms.
Well, I guess that is a good thing, but we haven't really talked about the most important thing when it comes to divorce, and that is when there are children involved. What is the court's primary support for the child?
Yeah, so a court's responsibility, the judge's responsibility, is to figure out what's in the child's best interests. There are, I think, 14 factors that the judges look at, but those have to do with who the children have a bond with, who's traditionally done the most parenting, who, has been involved in decision-making around medical issues and education and all of that. The courts require a parenting plan for any divorce or custody case that lays out who's going to have primary custody, meaning the most time with the kids, and then determining who's going to have legal custody, which is the decision-making authority around issues of medical, education, religion, and extracurriculars, in addition to who has access to medical records. And so you can imagine that some of the most hotly contested parts of a divorce case are over these child issues when people don't agree on them. Sometimes a judge will nominate a person called a guardian ad litem to actually investigate what's in the child's best interests. And our firm actually works as a guardian ad litem, and we work with guardians often in custody cases to be able to help determine what is in the best interest of the kids.
Mm-hmm. And of course, there's so much to think about, and which people might not realize before making that decision to get divorced. Once people have made that decision, what misinformation are they commonly dealing with, or what myths do they possibly have about how the process is going to work?
So there's a variety of myths around the divorce process. The biggest one is that the woman or the mom is always going to get custody of the kids or is always going to get alimony. More and more that is changing, where the Georgia law is now specifically gender neutral on the issue of custody and visitation and child support. And so more and more fathers are getting primary custody or getting more split parenting time rather than it be defaulting to moms or women getting custody automatically. Another big misconception is that anybody can do family law, that if you find an attorney or you can do it yourself. There are a lot of attorneys who say they can do anything, but family law is very specialized. And so finding an attorney who specializes in family law so that they know all of the things that go on, they know how to do mediation and work with guardians ad litem. It's important to have somebody who knows family law and can actually focus on that issue for you.
Yeah, I always encourage people to find a specialist when it comes to dealing with something like this, because ultimately your best interest is having somebody on your side that knows exactly what they're doing. And if you are at a practice where they do everything, they're not focused, and they don't know everything that's happening within that family law situation. So what are some of the fears that people have about getting a divorce?
Yeah. So I think a lot of people are afraid of the financial ramifications of divorce. Am I going to be able to have a solid financial footing after I'm no longer in this, in the situation that I was before, supporting two households on the same amount of money that they were supporting one household? That's definitely a fear, and we do the best that we can to make sure that people are getting the support or the division of assets that they need in order to make a good life afterwards. I think people are also afraid of the effect that a divorce is going to have on their kids. And that's a big deal. We're seeing more and more kids that are part of blended households or different kinds of families. But the research shows that as long as the parents work hard to put the best interests of the children first, and that they can keep relationships with both parents, if appropriate, if they're safe with both parents, that is more important than being in an intact household. So our firm at least tries hard not to do anything that would harm the children or, their welfare moving forward, just to be able to get more money for our client. We're really child focused and making sure that the divorce has as limited impact on the kids' well-being as possible.
Right. And I'm sure listening to everybody's stories who come in and talk to you and looking for help, you have a fair bit of counseling that needs to go on there as well. When people make this decision, do you advise them either way? What would be in their best interest to actually stay married or get divorced?
We definitely, at initial consults, especially if nothing has been filed yet, we'll talk to people about what divorce means to them. Sometimes there are family pressures to get divorced or not get divorced, depending on what's going on. If there are safety issues, as in a domestic violence situation, we may advise them to hold off until they can get to a safe space. And we will talk to them about the financial ramifications. And we do have people who will come in for initial consult or even file for divorce and then decide later to reunify with their spouse. We definitely encourage everybody to go to counseling, either individually or couples counseling. And some people, just want to come and get their options in order, but aren't actually going to file for divorce. So we do talk to people about their options and are not, it's not a high pressure situation. We have plenty of people who want to get divorced without us having to encourage anybody else to do it if they don't want to.
Yeah, that's right. Well, JoAnna, tell us a little bit about some of the clients that you've worked with. Give me some examples of I'm sure it's a broad spectrum here, but, what they were dealing with when they came to see you, and, what were the circumstances, and how ultimately were you able to help them solve their problem, and what was the outcome after divorce?
Sure. So we're seeing a lot more of same-sex couples who come to us, who the law is so new around same-sex divorce that there's not a lot of people that know what to do with them, especially when there's kids involved. So we had a couple come to us recently who the children were born prior to the marriage, and then same-sex marriage was legalized, and they're trying to figure out, can they have a custody plan with the children? How do they get divorced? And we were able to walk them through that process in a sensitive way to their situation, but also applying the law as it's developing to their case, and being able to get them divorced. And so we're pleased they were able to separate and get divorced and have a good custody plan that is in the best interest of the children. They're getting to see both of their moms and continuing that relationship, even though the law is a little bit unclear around that.
Mm-hmm.
We also recently are working with a mom who hasn't been getting the child support that she needs. She has a son who has some severe mental health issues, and so really needs some, doctors and other things that her previous spouse was supposed to be helping her pay for, and he hasn't been doing that. we are able, we filed a case and had a temporary hearing, and now he's back to paying half of the things that he was supposed to be paying for. He's exercising his parenting time. And so she's able to have some support in taking care of her son who needs a lot more support. So we work with a variety of kinds of people and different kinds of cases, but are, able to tailor our services to what they need in order to get them, help them achieve the objectives that they are looking for in their particular case.
Mm-hmm. And we haven't really talked about what happens to one party if they stop paying child support or stop contributing to the welfare and the upbringing of the child. What can the court do in those circumstances?
Yeah, if there's a court order in place and one party is not following that court order, the other party is going to file what's called a contempt action. And a contempt is saying, you were able to do this, you were supposed to do this, but you didn't do it. And so you're asking the court to enforce that. Some of the penalties could be, if you haven't paid child support, you could actually be sent to jail until you've paid off your child support. You can be ordered to follow the order as you were supposed to, and there can be other fines and having to pay the attorney's fees for the person who filed for contempt. So it's very serious to not file a court order or to follow a court order. We definitely are representing people who've found themselves in financial hardships, and so we're unable to follow a court order, and we help them figure it out with the other party or with the court to make sure that they don't have any of those negative consequences if we can help it. So that's definitely a serious issue that we see often, and work on both sides of that issue.
Mm-hmm. So what are some of the little-known pitfalls or common mistakes you see parents make when it comes to divorce?
Well, if you do have an attorney, keeping your attorney in the loop on what's happening is really important. Even if you don't have an attorney, keeping good records of everything that happens. So keeping good records of when you paid child support or when you received child support. How did the visitation exchange go? Things like that is super important. And if you do have an attorney, sharing that log with them is important so that they know how to best, what issues are important to you and then what they need to focus on. But another pitfall that parents, and I think parties in general, even if they don't have children, fall into is blaming the other party and trying to get the other party rather than trying to figure out what's in your own best interest. And so if you're getting a divorce, it's probably because you don't want to be with that person anymore and that you need to move on to something else. And so continuing to focus on all of the back history and the things that have happened in the past isn't helpful for moving on with your own new exciting life. And so I always encourage people to figure out, let's do what you need to do in order to set up for your next phase of life rather than dwelling on the past.
Right. And obviously it's a time when emotions are running high and there's that certain amount of animosity between each other. So, looking forward to the future is definitely some great advice. Well, JoAnna, tell us a little bit more about yourself and what inspired you to become a family law attorney.
Sure. Before law school, I was a doula, which is a birth support person. And as a doula, I was able to help families transition into a new phase of their lives by providing good information, helping them make decisions, and really impacting a stressful time in their lives. And I've determined that as an attorney, I can do the same thing in people's divorce process, where I can provide good information and support and help them make good decisions as they move through this life transition. And so I use that skill, those skills and my legal education in order to hopefully create a positive impact on people's lives.
Well, I like professions where you're really filling a need, and there certainly is a need to hire an attorney when you are contemplating divorce. So you are definitely helping people out a lot when it comes to that. So what's the most important thing that somebody who is evaluating a family law attorney or a divorce attorney should consider before making a decision?
Again, you want to make sure that your attorney is somebody who does a lot of family law and isn't just dabbling in it. You want to make sure you understand your retainer agreement, what your contract is with that attorney, so what they will cover and what they won't. And you also want to understand your payment schedule with them. Attorneys generally don't work for free unless it's a pro bono case. And so you need to understand what your financial obligations are to them and if you can actually afford them. Most attorneys won't be able to tell you, especially in family custody cases, how long the process is going to take and whether you're going to win or get what you want. And so the most important thing to focus on is, does your attorney have a strategy for you? Do you feel like they understand your case? And do they understand your needs as a person going through this divorce or custody process? So make sure you ask a lot of questions. If they are sketchy about answering them, that might not be the right person for you. And make sure they understand where you're coming from so that you know that you're getting the right person for you. It's more about a fit rather than, are they a fancy firm in a big building. It's whether or not you feel comfortable with your attorney.
Mm-hmm. Yes, very important. And does this happen during a consultation?
Absolutely. So different attorneys do it different ways. We have 1-hour consultations where we have people either come in or by phone and talk to us about their case. Some attorneys charge for consultations, some don't. We do have a small fee for consultations because we like to give people the best bang for their buck and actually give them advice during their consultation time. Some attorneys will, use a phone call to get information and then, later on have a more formal consultation with you. So absolutely, you can always set up meetings with attorneys to get advice and to get information prior to making any decisions about filing a case or anything like that. But do reach out to a variety of attorneys to find one that's a good fit for you.
Mm-hmm. Well, JoAnna, if somebody wants to reach out to you and Anderson, Rupani and Smith, how do they get in contact with you?
The best way to find us is on our website, which is www.arsfamily.com, or they can give us a call at 404-480-2701. We're also on Facebook at ARS Family, so you can find us there and get links to all of our other social media.
Well, JoAnna Smith, thank you very much for being my guest on Expert Profiles Atlanta today. I've certainly learned a lot, and I'm sure our listeners will have learned a lot as well. And if you are considering divorce, reach out to JoAnna and Anderson, Rupani and Smith, and hopefully they can help you out. And obviously, by what JoAnna says today, they're putting your best interests first. So thank you very much, JoAnna, for being my guest today.
Thanks so much for having me. It's been a pleasure.
And to our listening audience, if you like what you hear, hit that like button and share, and we'll see you next time on the show.
Thank you for listening to Expert Profiles Atlanta with Neil Howe. To learn more about the resources in the show or to listen to past episodes, visit expertprofilesatlanta.com.